You're not in your room anymore. You're in a castle. Cold stone beneath your knees. A flicker of light trembles on the wall. Not enough to warm, not enough to see clearly. The air is still, as if the silence has aged inside it. You are alone, but not unobserved. The floor smells of wet ash and old sandalwood. You breathe in. The scent burns. You forget, sometimes, that you're allowed to breathe at all. You were born a princess, but no one asked if you wanted the title. Your crown isn't gold, it's the weight of expectations sharpened into blades. You rise before the sun. You bow so often, your spine learned submission before your voice ever did. You bleed monthly and silently, clean your own cuts, and smile only when instructed. Your hands are rough, your eyes trained, your heart irrelevant. It is winter now, the kind of winter that bites through robes and bones. Snow falls soundlessly in the courtyard, but inside these walls, frost blooms on the edge of conversation. You haven't smiled in years, not genuinely, not foolishly. But then, you see him. The first time is forgettable. He is part of a captured unit, another prisoner of skirmishes not important enough to be recorded in scrolls. But he walks like the cold doesn't touch him. He holds his wounds like they owe him something. And when you look into his face, just for a moment, he doesn't look away. He should, you should, but neither of you do. He doesn't kneel. That's the part that echoes in your mind for nights after. He's brought before the council, beaten and dirty, yet something in him remains upright. The guards notice, your father notices. You notice too, but not with strategy, with curiosity. You've killed men who flinched less, but this one, he doesn't flinch at all. And you don't kill him. That's how it begins, not with declarations, not with songs, but with hesitation, a blink too slow, a breath you didn't mean to hold. There's a rhythm to your day, always has been. Wake before the servants, bathe in cold water, braid your hair with precision, bow to elders, practiced kata until your arms shake, ignore your hunger, numb your shame, hide your thoughts. That's the protocol. The protocol keeps you alive. The protocol keeps you royal. But now your thoughts have a face, one that smells like blood and cedar ark, one that makes silence feel crowded. You find yourself remembering the curve of his ear when you should be sharpening blades. You rehearse indifference in the mirror. You fail. You were taught to slit throats, not notice collarbones. You were taught to track footsteps, not follow voices in dreams. You count his scars now, not his sins. That is treason, and treason wears your face when you sleep. Your armor chafes. It always did. The metal binds under your arms, bruises your ribs, flattens your chest until your own body feels foreign. But you never minded, not really. Pain was a kind of silence too. Until now. Now, the idea of him touching your shoulder, not in combat, not in discipline, but gently, feels more dangerous than arrows. You think of it while tightening your chest plates. You think of it while drawing your bow. You think of it and you forget how to breathe. He doesn't speak, That's the worst part. He is always just present enough to haunt you. His silences are dense, filled with things he chooses not to say. When he does bow to you, once during a rain-soaked transition between posts, it is different. Not because of the gesture, but because of the eyes. He bows like a soldier. Then, very briefly, like a man. You were never taught what to do with tenderness. It's not in the scrolls. It wasn't in your training. You know how to gut a deer and stitch a wound. You do not know how to stand near someone and want nothing but closeness. You watched him drink water once. Just that. The curve of his throat, the steam rising from the cup. It felt obscene. You looked away and hated yourself. You looked back anyway. No battle begins loudly. They start like this, with glances that last too long, and footsteps that linger, with held breaths and skipped pulses. This is not a war you can prepare for. It is something worse, something gentler, something called hope. And hope doesn't survive in castles. Not when every glance is counted, not when your attendants report how many times you blink, not when your future has already been promised to someone with wealth, land, and no poetry in his bones. But you hope anyway. You dare to. Even knowing that the gods who shaped this world have never been kind to women who want. The snow continues to fall. Inside your chest, something begins to thaw. It is not love, not yet, but it is the beginning of disobedience. And in a palace like this, that is more fatal than any blade. It happens over rice, steamed, salted, unspectacular, the kind of food no one writes about. You're seated in the eastern corridor, where the wind creeps in from beneath the wood panels and makes your knees ache. You are not hungry. You are never hungry when he's near. But he walks by, pauses, and without speaking, places a small wrapped bowl beside you. It's clumsy, improper. There are servants for this, spies too. But his hand brushes yours. Not long enough to mean anything, just long enough to remember later. You say nothing. You look forward. You choose slowly, because for the first time in your life, you want the rice to last. You want to taste every grain. You want to pretend this, whatever this is, has time. He doesn't look back. He doesn't need to. The heat in your palms remains long after he disappears into shadow. Later that night, you dream of bread so soft it dissolves in your mouth. In the dream, he watches you eat it. You wake angry, not because of the dream, but because it was better than your life. The worst betrayals don't begin with action. They begin with emotion. You don't touch him, you barely speak to him, but something inside you has shifted, and you know it. You feel it when you unsheath your blade, and it no longer sings. You feel it when you hear his voice echo in the courtyard, and your stomach coils, not from fear, but from something else. You miss the bruises from training. You miss the numbness. You miss the hard edges of duty that used to carve meaning into your spine. Now everything feels too soft, too breakable, as if your discipline has become tissue and your thoughts bleed through. There are days when you train until your arms throb and your knees buckle, just to forget the curve of his hands. You never forget. No one says anything, not yet, but you feel it. A pause too long when you enter a room, a servant who coughs twice in the same spot every morning, just outside your chamber, a guard who lingers after you've passed. You've lived in this castle since before you bled, and now it no longer trusts you. The walls seem to listen more than they echo. The lanterns flicker when you speak his name in thought. Even the koi in the pond turn their eyes away. They smell disobedience like smoke, your aunt once whispered to you as a girl, brushing knots from your hair. You hadn't understood then, you understand now. So you speak less, you bow lower, you move like your body belongs to the castle again. But inside, your softness hardens into something new, something unspoken, something dangerous. You're not supposed to be there. It's late, and the training ground should be empty. But there he is, slumped against the lacquered post, his shoulder torn open like old silk. Blood, dark and slow, maps a path down his ribs, soaking into his sash. He doesn't notice you at first. His eyes are half-lidded, lips tight, the way men look before death or confession. You don't speak. You kneel. Your fingers find the cut before your thoughts can stop them. It's warm, sticky, real. He flinches, but only at your gaze, not your touch. You expect pain. He offers stillness. You press cloth to skin and feel his breath under it. It rattles in his chest like a drum played too long. You should call someone. Instead, you press harder. The blood stains your hand. You stare at it. You don't wipe it away. The ink is poor, your calligraphy worse, but the letters breathe things you can't. Each one is a whisper you're too afraid to speak. You fold them small, tuck them beneath loose boards in your chamber, the ones behind the third screen, where no servant ever sweeps. You don't know if he reads them, you never ask, but some disappear, and some, strangely, return. Folded differently, weighted with words not yours, but meant for you. Writing them feels like bleeding with intention. You don't tremble from fear. You tremble because you're honest, and honesty, in this place, is treason. You say his name once during sword drills, quietly, beneath your breath. No one hears, or so you think. But the sakura tree at the edge of the courtyard shifts. Its petals fall prematurely. You wonder if it listened. You begin to speak to the wind, not in full sentences, in fragments, in names, in wishes. You ask it to be kind. You ask it to keep secrets. You ask it if he dreams of you too. Sometimes, when he trains nearby, the breeze touches your neck in time with his footfalls. You pretend it's coincidence. You pretend many things. But the wind remembers, and so do you. They summon you to the inner chamber. Lanterns burn low, and incense chokes the air with the smell of old prayers and unshed violence. Your father sits at the head, surrounded by old men whose eyes no longer see, only weigh. The talk is of strategy, of borders, of treason. But then someone says his name, not softly, not in passing. His name lands like a sword between bowls of rice. Someone speaks of surveillance, of loyalty, of questionable silences. No one looks directly at you, but everyone does. You bow, you nod, you breathe, and inside, your ribs fold in on themselves like paper in a fire. You wonder if they can hear the echo of your heartbeat in your throat. The next time you see him, it's midday, a public gathering. Soldiers aligned, banners stiff in the wind. He bows to you like the others, but something's different. The tilt of his head, the duration, the deliberate way he avoids your eyes.
Lower than usual, longer than required. You feel the silence around him like a scream pressed underwater. You want to run to him, to shout, to crack the ceremony open with your mouth. But that would be mercy, and mercy is never allowed in daylight. So you bow too, perfectly, distantly, as if he were no more than a shadow you once mistook for warmth. You rise earlier, hit harder, stay longer. The wooden post you strike cracks before your knuckles do. You wrap them tighter, not for protection, but to feel something break under control. Pain was always a teacher. Now it's a distraction. You train until your shoulders shake, until your legs forget softness. You imagine his voice during kata, his breath at your back. You curse him silently with every swing, knowing full well you're only drawing him deeper into your bones. Blood pools in your gloves. You don't stop. You don't clean it. You just press your forehead to the wood and whisper his name into the splinters. And in that moment, you're not a princess, not a warrior, just someone trying to unlove a ghost that breathes. There's no moon, only mist clinging to the stones like secrets too afraid to rise. You slip past the sentries in silence, heart pounding in rhythm with the crunch of frost beneath your sandals. Every shadow looks like guilt. Every gust of wind feels like a whisper chasing you back. But you keep going, past the stables, through the broken gate near the koi pond that hasn't seen fish in years. He waits by the old torii gate. The red has faded to a tired rust, but it still stands, watching you both with ancient disapproval. You don't speak. Words are too loud for something this delicate. He hands you a bundle wrapped in cloth. Rice, dried persimmon, hope disguised as practicality. You wear traveling clothes, foreign to your skin, like wearing someone else's name. You don't kiss. You don't promise. You just walk into the woods like people who believe walking is enough. The mountains have no sympathy. The wind strips your skin with elegance. It sneaks into your sleeves, your soles, your soul. You sleep in ditches, beneath shrines, under trees that shed their leaves like the memories you try to bury. Your lips crack from the dryness. Your toes sting with numbness. But he still smiles at you across the fire, the kind of smile that says, if this kills us, at least it was our choice. You chew bark, boil river water with suspicion, and watch your fingers tremble with something between cold and disbelief. The worst part isn't the pain. It's how alive it makes you feel. The third night, you eat rice stolen from a roadside shrine. You bow before you take it. The guilt tastes better than the food. By the fifth night, there's nothing left to steal. He traps a rat with a string and a prayer. You skin it with hands that once held calligraphy brushes. When it squeals, something inside you dies. When it stops, something else rises, something harder. You eat the meat in silence. It tastes like shame. You cry. He buries the bones with his bare hands, lips moving in apology to something neither of you can name. Love doesn't leave, but it does grow quieter, tired, less romantic, more real.
The village doesn't ask questions, perhaps because it has too many of its own. The people there walk with heads bowed, not out of humility, but habit, as if they've spent lifetimes dodging notice. You tell them you're husband and wife. They nod, uninterested. In a place where winters kill children and rice is currency, no one has the luxury of curiosity. You're the wife now. Your name is replaced by your chores. You fetch water in buckets that bruise your shoulders. You cook over fires that never quite burn away the damp. He becomes the quiet one. Children follow him, begging for sword drills they barely understand. He shows them how to breathe, how to fall, how to stand up again. They laugh, and for a moment, it feels like safety. It's not a life, but it's a pause, and sometimes that's all survival asks for. His beard comes in with more gray than you remember. He loses a tooth one morning chewing on dried sweet potato. You laugh, too hard, too long. It feels strange to hear your own joy echo against walls. He grins, toothless and proud, like a boy showing off a war wound. Then it's your turn. A pregnancy that never finishes. Blood where it shouldn't be. Pain you can't explain. He holds your hair back as you scream into cloth, rocking your body like a cradle that never had the chance to hold. He doesn't speak. He just presses his forehead to your spine and breathes like he's trying to absorb your pain through his skin. You both look older after that. Not in the mirror, in the way you move, in how you fall asleep during conversation, in how you stop pretending the soldiers won't come. The knock never breaks. That's what makes it worse. You jump at every branch hitting the roof. Every cough from the neighbors makes your pulse stutter. You imagine footsteps in the field, armor clinking behind the trees. His hand always finds yours when you freeze, not to calm you, but to remind you that he still hears them too. You prepare for capture without saying it out loud. You keep a bundle packed by the door. You rehearse lies in your head. We're farmers. We don't read. We've never even seen a castle. But the silence never breaks. And after a while, it becomes its own kind of captivity. You survive, but you don't exhale. The seasons forget to change for you. Time settles into your bones like a second winter. The village continues its quiet decay around you. Roofs sag, children become farmers. The riverbed lowers itself year by year. You no longer remember the exact color of the palace tiles, but you remember how they echoed under your boots. You remember the weight of silk armor, the bite of silence in council chambers, the way your spine knew when to bow even before your mind could.
Resist. You wake before the sun still, not out of duty, but because your body never unlearned obedience. Loud footsteps still make you flinch. When you carry buckets from the well, you imagine the clang of swords behind you. When you wash your face, your hands hesitate, as if expecting to find someone else's blood there. You're not a princess anymore. You're not anything, really. But the rules that shaped you still rule the rhythms of your breath. And when you sleep, it's not always peaceful, but it's deep, heavy, like the sleep of someone who knows she was never meant to dream. And that, somehow, becomes enough. It happens the way spring always does, slowly, then all at once. One morning the frost gives up, the plum blossoms arrive, unsure and trembling. You notice him coughing more. He hides it the way men do when death begins to whisper in their lungs. You keep fetching water, keep boiling rice, keep pretending the warmth in his hands will return. But it doesn't. He dies with his eyes open. You're not there. He dies between breaths, in the same room where he once taught a boy to swing a wooden sword. You find him still seated, still upright, still him, until he isn't. You bury him beneath the plum trees. There is no ritual, no temple,
just dirt and silence, and the ache in your knees as you dig. The earth is soft from the thaw, like it knows how to cradle him better than a throne ever could. You place a flat stone over the grave. Not a name, just a shape. He once told you he liked plum blossoms. You pretend he meant that as a request. You don't cry when it's over, but for weeks, your hands forget how to be still. You press them into your lap, into the table, into the ground, like they're trying to hold him one last time. The blossoms fall around you like quiet applause, not for love, not for grief, but for surviving both. The castle grows quieter without footsteps that once echoed beside yours. The mornings no longer demand the same stiffness, the same forced breaths between armor plates. You live alone now, the walls heavy with memories folded into every creak and shadow. Your body remembers the rules of the court, the sharp angles of protocol, the cold bite of discipline, long after your mind has tried to forget. Oddly, you sleep better. Not because the pain has softened or vanished, but because you've grown used to its shape. It nestles beside you like a silent companion, a rhythm carved into your nights. The absence of his voice no longer stops. It's a hollow space you've learned to fill with your own breath, steady and slow. Sometimes you wake, startled by phantom touches or whispers, only to realize the castle has become a sanctuary for ghosts. Yours most of all. You were a princess once, fierce and unyielding, a warrior who dared to hope, a traitor who dared to love. Then a wife, bound by promises made before you knew how to choose. Now, you are a ghost walking softly through halls that no longer demand your presence, only your memory. This is the quiet after the storm, where love rots and lingers, and you learn that survival is sometimes the softest kind of victory. There is no final curtain here. The echoes remain, soft rustlings like armor brushing empty air, the faint scent of cedar and old blood lingering in the quiet corners. Names once spoken with urgency now fall into silence, but they haunt the tongue, tasting warm and impossibly alive long after the voices have gone. The house holds its breath, waiting, remembering. The plum trees bloom again each year, indifferent to human sorrow, their petals drifting like faded memories on the wind. And beneath them, the weight of a story unfinished. A love unvanquished by time or death carries on quietly, as endless as the seasons, as insistent as the pulse beneath your ribs. Some stories don't end. They become part of the air you breathe, the shadow you can't quite escape, the whisper of a name that never fades. This is not closure. It is the quiet insistence of what once was, forever echoing in the spaces between heartbeats.